Laurie Montgomery Stapleton's eyes popped open much earlier than usual, and without Jack Stapleton repeatedly nudging her shoulder. She couldn't remember the last time she'd spontaneously awakened at such an hour, but her mind was churning because it was going to be an exceptionally busy day. So busy, in fact, that she was going to have to talk Jack, who was still blissfully sleeping next to her, into standing in her stead for at least one of her obligations, and that was not going to be an easy task. A week previous, she'd agreed to go into John Jr.'s school and meet with his fourth-grade teacher, Miss Rossi, and possibly the school psychologist about JJ's supposedly recent disruptive behavior. Apparently there had been some aggressive incidents on the playground during recess and other impulse control episodes. Knowing Jack's impatience with such issues, and his tendency to be less than diplomatic, Laurie hadn't even broached the subject with him, preferring to handle it herself, as she was certain there was nothing wrong with JJ. Now Jack was going to have to handle the situation on his own, because Laurie had newly arisen, pressing work-related obligations down at City Hall that conflicted. By lifting her head and gazing out of the two large north-facing sixth-floor bedroom windows, Laurie could tell that the sun had just peeked over the eastern horizon. Although there were closable window treatments and even blackout shades, neither she nor Jack bothered to close them. Several blocks away, on the top of a significantly taller building, she could see an old water tower. At the moment, it was totally awash with early morning sunlight, giving the illusion that it was made of gold. Next, Laurie's eyes turned to glance at the digital clock. It was even earlier than she'd suspected, just a smidgen past 5:50. Yet she was totally awake. Laurie had never in her life been a morning person, and always struggled to wake up and get out from under the warm covers. It had been particularly true since she'd married Jack, because Jack insisted they keep the bedroom cool, almost cold from Laurie's perspective. But the real reason Laurie had trouble getting up in the morning was that she was a night owl beyond any doubt. On occasion she'd been known to sleep through an alarm only feet away. When she'd been younger, she'd loved to read fiction far into the night, with a predilection for late 18th century and early 20th century novels. That began to change once she'd become a doctor and needed to keep up with the ever-expanding professional literature. These days she was obsessed with reading not only the current forensic articles but also all the material she was expected to be familiar with as the chief medical examiner of the city of New York. As the first woman to hold the title and thus a pioneer of sorts, she felt particular responsibility to be the absolute best she could be. To that end, she'd had to learn how to read spreadsheets and budgets and all the appropriate reports coming out of the New York City Council from its various committees, and from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. She still sometimes found herself shocked at the sheer volume of documents that landed in her inbox. Despite Laurie's commitment to doing her job well, the jury was still out in terms of how she personally felt about having accepted the position. Only now did she have a true idea of the extent of the political aspects of the job. It had been her general understanding that the office of the chief medical examiner, known as OCME, had fought and gained its independence after its founding in 1918 so that it could speak unencumbered for the dead. Although that was mostly true, she was learning the hard way that the mayor, who had appointed her, and the city council, which held the purse strings, could exert considerable power, which she had to struggle to resist. It was especially hard since the OCME's $75 million yearly budget was a tempting target in a city continually starving for funds for other worthwhile obligations. On top of that, the morgue itself, where all the autopsies were actually done, was in need of a multi-million-dollar replacement. At one time it had been state-of-the-art, but that was no longer the case. Apart from the political headaches of the job, Laurie found that she missed the intellectual stimulation of being personally immersed in the actual forensics, with the responsibility of determining the cause and manner of death. Objectively, she recognized that it was best for her to let the nearly 40 highly qualified medical examiners handle all the cases. Otherwise, as her predecessor, Dr. Bingham, had learned the hard way, every district attorney, police higher-up, fire chief, city bigwig, and mayor would want the chief to do any case they were interested in simply because he was the top dog. But for Laurie, it was a sacrifice to take a step back and settle for frequent, unofficial morning rounds down in the morgue, looking over people's shoulders and asking questions. The closest she came to being intimately involved was Thursday morning, when she regularly assisted one of the forensic pathology fellows on an autopsy.